for your work, first of all, and also for allowing me to be here. It's very important, I think, in every space where we are talking about the future, because this is a question of the future, but also of the present, and in fact, of the past, yes, because this should be made in some years ago, actually, no? So thank you for bringing children to the table, which is something very important. Right now, we are in this COP, we are seeing how the negotiations are not going, let's say, very well, no? And this affects also the development of the SDG 13, no? For me, one of the most important, so in the one I'm focused on, the climate action, no? Climate action, I think, it's the climate change, the climate crisis is the biggest threat we can have as humanity, no? And nevertheless, knowing that this crisis is also a human rights crisis and a crisis that threatens the life, the own life, and the well-being of our societies and our peoples, we continue not taking action, no? Or governments continue ignoring, let's say, the importance of developing these SDGs in order to give a very quality of life for our peoples and nations. So that's why I would like to start precisely asking you, what's the importance of meeting these SDGs precisely? Why are they important, and how can we make these SDGs possible, a reality?
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you, Silvio. It's fantastic to be here in once again talking about a very strategic, very important partnership between the United Nations Development Program and ISO. Look, 2015 is an incredible year. It feels like a century ago, at a time in which, we, the international community, in the same year, were able to agree the Paris Agreement, right? And Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, why is the SDGs important? The SDGs is the consensus, the common platform by which every country in the world, with heavy participation from business, from civil societies, agreed a plan, right? What are those 17 goals? What are they? They are a common platform for a better world for you, for my children. Right, slightly, I have a daughter which is, pretty much your age. It is for you that we hope to have, a world where the climate crisis is managed, where the poverty ends, where there is equality between genders, where poverty is gone, where there is inequalities is reduced, where we have a stable life under the ocean and a stable life on land, right? Energy transition, and those goals they are interconnected. So you can't look at each one of those goals in isolation. They're actually a system, right? A representation of how we live our lives. Nobody lives our life, nobody listening to us today lives a life in isolation. So the SDGs were on track before COVID. Now they are off track, right? But I don't think we should be, disheartened to the nature that we are off track on those goals. It is important that we do whatever we can to get to 2030 with the highest amount of progress possible into the whole goals. Because in the end, that is the life we want. A life of dignity within planetary boundaries.
Thank you for that question, for that answer, and for explaining in an easy way what are the SDGs important for a better life for me, but also I wanted to say for yourself. You told that for me and for your daughter, but for yourself.
Yeah, indeed.
Long time.
I still hope to be around for a few decades.
Of course. And for you, what do you think are the biggest challenge right now for the implementation of SDGs in the world?
Thank you, Francisco and Marcos, for being here with us. So, I think the importance of this partnership with UNDP and with ISO is actually to bring the technical community and the network of ISO in 170 countries to have a very concrete tool about what do they need to do to put in place actions, resources, and a plan to achieve the SDGs that are most important for the lives of those people in that countries, in those cities, at a very local level. I think the importance of this is that really small and medium enterprise companies in the cities from around the world can really get to the real life about, okay, if we want to achieve one SDG, the 13, what's our contribution to SDG 13 on climate change? Or on SDG 8, it's like, or the other on focus on decent work. It's like, what does that mean? It's like, how do we plan for that? First, how do we select the SDGs that are most important for our community? And we, be a small company or a city, that we can decide that we can have an impact there, and what is necessary to do in very practical ways. Because I think what's very important to highlight is the sense of urgency. It's like we are 6 years from 5 years and 2 months from 2030, right? It's like that's very important that if we start reinventing the wheel, if we started planning, thinking again in a separated way, not in a coordinated way, how we are going to achieve those SDGs, the time will go by very fast. It's very important that we are all aligned and have a concrete tool about how to make progress to the SDGs that the companies and the cities believe that they can make a concrete impact.
Thank you so much for that answer. And now, having this background and this context about the importance of the SDGs and the importance of understanding these problems in a holistic way, in an integral way to solve them, I would like directly to pass to these guidelines and to ask you precisely what is a standard. What is a standard, and how standards are used, and why are they useful?
Maybe I take the first on what is the standard. So as I mentioned, look, international standard is when you bring together between 50 people and 200 people from 20 different countries to agree on what's the best way of doing something. And that can be the best way of achieving the SDGs, but it can also be the best way of producing food in a sustainable and safe way, how during the COVID, how to produce the masks that are the most effective masks. You can have standards in all different areas of activity in society. And a standard is basically when you bring the people together and they agree what's the best way of doing something. And then, in our case, what we do is to define that on an international level, with the agreement of people from many different countries, and then all these countries that are parts of ISO, they can take that international standard and adopt at national level. They translate, they make a small adjustment so that it's relevant for their countries, for their conditions, and the people on the field in those countries can adapt it. And they can integrate, because when you think, for example, about food safety, if you want to make sure that the food that we are having in the supermarket, or not on the supermarket, on the pizza place that we go to buy a pizza on the Saturday evening, you need to think from the ingredients until the recycling of the materials and the waste of that pizza shop, right? It's like actually you need to think about everything. You need the standards for all that. You need the standards for the ingredients, you need the standard for the machines, you need the standard then for the recycling afterwards. That's what is the importance also, that you have the technical knowledge for all the steps that are related to food or education or technology.
Okay. Just to complement it,
yes.
For us, UNDP, the important element of the partnership with ISO and the importance of why having standards is to have, one, a level playing field for everybody, and two, to avoid greenwashing, SDG washing, whatever washing you want to put it in there, right? Because if you have standards, then you are able to say, yes, what company A in country Y and company B in country Z are actually doing something that is comparable, rather than, oh, this is great and this is bad, based on what? So standards are important to create the level playing field and to let us know that what you say you're doing is true.
This is very important actually, and I appreciate a lot for my generation to have this kind of standards. Also because we suffer another other kind of washing, no, let's say youth washing, no, how we are used simply to be in the pictures and then in the decisions we are excluded, no, and precisely I would like now to go to that important part of the future and present generations. My generation, how can the young people and children, I would add, get involved in this kind of partnerships and initiative related to the standards?
So look, this is the guidelines that we're talking about, right? You know, now they follow ISO's methodologies. If you look at the document, it doesn't look very appealing, but it is what has been going on for 75 years, right? So people that we want to use those guidelines are very familiar with the way the things are organized, but because they are doing ISO standards from all kinds of different things, you know, from machineries to ingredients, you know, to making the pizza. So it's important to provide them with familiarity. Now, it's practical, it's pragmatic. So your school, Francisco, can do this. Pick up these guidelines, go back home, pick up these guidelines, sit down with the school, right? And you can start by saying, what are the priorities SDGs for your school? Let's say SDG 13. Pick that up. Figure out, you know, what is the actions that you can do, you know, by choosing SDG 13. For example, you can say, you know, one of the things a school needs to do is to look at the energy efficiency of your school. So do an energy audit, which they tell you here. You want to do an energy audit. Figure out how much you spend on energy, and you know, maybe you change the light bulbs, maybe you bring somebody to make sure that the windows are all closed and so on. So increase the energy efficiency. Deal with the waste. Every schools produce waste. You know, can you reduce the production of waste, and how do you dispose final waste, being organic or inorganic? So those are the examples of how your school, right, with your colleagues, you know, your friends can take action. Now, you're here in Baku, right? I'm extremely thankful for you to be here, for your parents to bring you here, to let you come here, from your community to bring you here, because we need your voice. You're right. This is an issue of the present, the past, and the future, right? And we need to work together in the intergenerational way. But we, in the United Nations Development Program, really believe that the voice that needs to be heard, and our role is to help augment that voices, is your generation. So this is a technical tool that helps your school do something, but more important than that, for you and for your friends back home, add your voice. Don't get disheartened. Those negotiations are tough. Fine, doesn't matter. You know, we've been in this game for 29 COPs. We're going to be in this game for longer. Add your voice. Don't stay home.
Of course, and we'll continue doing it. And let me make sure that I will take this back home, and then we'll use it and overall implement it in my school and in other schools that maybe this can be useful. Now I would like to give the opportunity to our audience to ask questions. If there is maybe any question relating these guidelines, any comment, suggestion, or anything you would like to mention, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name's Andy Andrea. I also work with ISO, but I'd like to ask ISO and UNDP, how can young people get involved in creating the future in terms of getting involved in the development of standards as well? And maybe that's something for Francisco to answer as well. So how can you get involved in the creation of global international standards for the future that you want to create?
Thank you for the question. What was your name, by the way?
Andy.
Andy, thank you, Andy, for the question. Well, I think first of all, what we need is that these technical tools that are already made and are already, let's say, approved and how to say then, and yes, made by experts, are translated into a child-friendly language. No, I think this is another very important question when we talk about participation in general, no? Participation of children and of any other population, and as also indigenous people. The participation, in order to be meaningful, in order to be a true participation, needs also to be complemented with the access to accessible and let's say understandable information for everyone. And of course, for example, for many adults, it's already difficult to understand these lots and lots of papers, no? So even for children is, I think, more difficult. It is not maybe for other children is easier, is not too generalized, but of course we must do all our efforts to facilitate the access to the information and to an accessible information also in terms of the language. And then also that implies education, no? Education to understand what you already told me, but that many children don't know, no? So that's why I think that also in the national plans of countries, like for example now that we are going to update our NDCs, we need to put also in them, to include in them, environmental, climate and citizenship education. I think we need that schools are centers of making children understand their global citizenship, no? And what does it mean? Basically, it means that every child, without mattering their age or where they are from or any condition, they can take action, they have a voice and they have an agency, and we must to make aware them about that in order to them to use their voices, to use their power and their influence, basically, no? I think that is what I would say the best way to get children and to make aware them about the importance of these standards, no? That would be. Thank you, Danny, for your question. Now, there is any other question also for our panelists?
Can I complement on that? I think
Yes.
that it's about how youth can get involved with the standards development. I think that's very important, because one thing is that we are talking more about the use of the standards in the communities, in the schools, in your sports clubs, and so. But also that we bring the voice of the next generation into the development of the standards, so that you bring your perspective and your considerations when we are designing, when our experts are designing those guidelines, those instructions, it's like those roadmaps, those plans. It's very important that, and that is here for all the young people listening to us, it's really an invitation for you to engage with, go to the ISO.org website. There's the list of the members of ISO from 170 countries all around the world, and you can reach out to those members. We can help you. Also, you can reach out to us. We'll guide you to what is the member of ISO in your respective country, that you can identify what are the groups of experts that exist in your country that are developing standards there, and you can participate in that process. It's very important that you bring your voice, like what you said, that it's not sufficient that we have a young leader here discussing with us how to use these standards. We need to involve your generation in the development of these tools that the leaders from companies and from governments will be using to implement the objectives.
For us, we have a program called Youth for Climate.
Yes, I know that problem.
Right, and I think it's, and we reach thousands of youth organizations all over the world through Youth for Climate. Maybe it's something we need to look at is how do we put down the guidelines, down the Youth for Climate, or use Youth for Climate to generate the mobilization for the next standards that you just described, Silvio. So you know, and in Youth for Climate, we actually collect the best ideas that youth from all over the world have in terms of youth mobilization for climate change. And sometimes we even provide financial resources. And I think we have a delegation here of youth which is brought to Baku through UNDP and Youth for Climate program. So that's another place to go and look for, you know, UNDP Youth for Climate program to engage.
Thank you for that answer, and also for telling us concrete ways and already proof ways to get engaged. And I fully agree that basically children, everything that is made in the context of our society is for young people, for children, for the people, but in many occasions is without them, no? So what you mentioned, no? In the development, in the designing, in the implementation, in all the process of the standards, we need to be included. And now, again, I would like to ask if there is any other question, and also ask about the time, if we are going well with the time. Yes, 5 minutes. Okay, good.
Thank you to all of you, and thank you, Francisco, for helping our community to really speak a simpler language. It's not really easy for this community to really speak plainly, so I think you being here is a really good thing for all of the standards community. I wanted to ask all of you, from your perspectives, how do you see these guidelines fostering really more collaboration between governments, the private sector, and youth in really driving meaningful action towards the achievement of the SDGs, particularly in the climate space?
I go back to this issue of comparability, right? But if you elevate it towards an understanding of a common language, I think what guidelines like this do is to provide companies, governments, youth, multilateral institutions with a common clarity to do things in a comparable way, right? You know, so when we talk about what does it mean to have a management for the SDG plan in a company, we know what we mean by that, because we are following the same guidelines. Otherwise, you know, how does a government put a regulation in place that says, look, I need companies of all size, right, to have a just transition plan towards climate change. So a government can put a regulation that demands that of a company, but it has to explain how is it going to tell if a company is in compliance or not of a regulation. And a guideline then becomes an important element to say, you know, I want every company to have a just transition plan on climate change, and you can use ISO-UNDP guideline to show me that you've done a transition plan that makes sense. That is where I think the conversations and the partnerships become easier by having tools like this.
Of course, I think that it's simply like, imagine a negotiation about any topic, but every delegate is talking in their own language. It's like this, no? Imagine, and even inside some countries there are many other languages. So here we have a common understanding and language to advance, to be talking the same language like right now. If not, we would be on our own ways without organizing or collaborating or talking to the other. No? So that, I think that's the importance also of these guidelines.
Well, and that would bring the aspect of having an integrated way for both, for governments as well as for private sector. I was looking here at the list of the SDGs, right? It's like, I was thinking a company that, let's say again the pizza, but now a company that produces the frozen pizza. They need to work, they are fighting hunger. They are thinking about healthy lives. They are thinking about the women and girls working on there, the water usage, the carbon impact on that, the decent work, the use of energy. Actually, that company, it's like needs to think about, out of the 17, maybe 10 SDGs are very relevant to their core. right? It's like, how do you think in an integrated way? Because a company, especially when you're talking a little bit more larger organizations, they cannot afford, I'll focus only on the SDG on water. No, actually, that's very narrow, right? It's not ambitious enough. You need to have a look at it in integrated way. And I think that's what this kind of tool brings. Enables from the management, from the decision makers of the companies as well from government to think about how all the pieces come together.
Thank you for that also. That difficult, I think, is one of the most difficult partnerships because of the lack of trust, no, between the public and private sector, no. There are some states that does not trust the private sector, but also the private sector as well does not trust other states, no. So I think that this is the message, no, today. This is a tool basically to build trust, something that we miss a lot in our society, no. To trust on each other and advance on the same way, in the same direction towards the implementation and realization of these SDGs. And that's why basically I just would like to finish this space thanking you and thanking all of the people that is in our audience for being here, and of course inviting you to reach UNDP and ISO to read and use these guidelines. Thank you so much, and yes, thank you.
Thanks, Marco. Thank you, Francisco.